The scent of cigarette smoke and stale coffee clung to the backstage corridors, a pungent reminder that even glamour has its corners of decay. I was Lira, lead singer and songwriter of our rising band, my voice praised for its clarity, my lyrics lauded as raw and real. The fans didn't know the sacrifices behind the sound, the endless rehearsals, the strained relationships, the compromises. Tonight, though, the weight of one sacrifice was far heavier than anything I'd faced. Zane, my boyfriend and the band's guitarist, lingered nearby, polishing his instrument with the exaggerated care of a man who thinks the world revolves around him. I knew that smile, the one that was charming, confident, and utterly poisonous. I had trusted it once. I had trusted him once. "This is it, Lira," Zane said casually, sliding a small vial across the equipment case toward me. "You've always been the perfectionist. Too meticulous. Too stubborn. Too much of a liability. It's why I need control. Why I deserve control." I stared at him, my stomach twisting, as if I could feel the lie crawling along my veins. My fingers trembled slightly, but I didn't take the vial. I had always prided myself on my instincts, on knowing when something in the music, in the life, in the people around me, was off. And tonight, every sense screamed danger. "I trusted you," I whispered, barely audible over the muffled cheers and claps echoing from the audience beyond the curtain. My voice cracked, though not with fear. Fear had left me hours ago. This was something darker. Betrayal. Cold, deliberate, premeditated betrayal. Zane's expression softened in the faintest, cruelest way. "Trust doesn't pay royalties, Lira. Contracts pay. The band pays." And now, he paused, his hand hovering over my arm as if to reassure me. "Your presence is cumbersome. Your genius inconvenient. One wrong move, and everything falls apart. You know I can't allow that." I realized too late that the drink he offered me backstage, the pill he insisted would calm my nerves before the final set, was laced. My body went rigid, my fingers curling around the edge of the table. I wanted to scream, to fight, to tell the world what he had become, but the words never left my lips. As my vision blurred, I saw the stage lights reflecting in his eyes, cold and calculating, not a spark of remorse. The irony wasn't lost on me. He wanted me gone so he could take the spotlight, yet my absence would not give him the admiration he craved. It would reveal him, strip him bare. In the suffocating darkness that claimed me, I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I made a promise, a silent vow that as my body succumbed, my mind would endure. If I were ever given the chance, I would expose every falsity he built, every contract he manipulated, every hollow applause he chased. The stage he believed would be his forever would crumble under the weight of his deceit, and I would watch. And then, as the music swelled from the speakers, the last note of our set ringing through the hall, the world went silent. Even in the void, I knew one thing. This was not the end. The smell of smoke and spilled beer was replaced by something sweeter, stale guitar strings, warm wood, and the faint tang of old amps. I was 18 again, in a small, dimly lit college bar where open mics attracted more nerves than applause. The air was thick with anticipation, but also with the sense that this was where music was honest, not curated, not marketed, not manipulated by contracts or contracts lawyers. I kept my distance at first, blending into the shadows, watching. And then I saw him.
Kai.
He was hunched over a bass, hands gliding over the strings with a care I had never witnessed from Zane. Every note seemed deliberate, born not from the desire to impress, but from the need to express. His eyes were focused, soft, yet intense, betraying a sensitivity that I recognized instantly. He was exactly what I needed, a musician who cared about truth, not ego. I approached him cautiously, as though approaching a delicate instrument. "That progression you're playing," I said quietly, leaning against the bar. "It's not just a riff. It could be a counterpoint to a composition I've been imagining." He looked up, brow furrowed, clearly skeptical. "A counterpoint? In a bar jam?" His voice was gentle, curious, and I could tell he wasn't used to people saying anything more than good or wow, cool riff. I can show you, I said, pulling out a notebook. Inside were scribbled chords, annotations, and a hidden harmonic progression, one I knew from memory would someday become the backbone of our biggest hit. The complexity of it made my hands shake. This was my future, my secret, my power. But I needed him. I needed someone who would respect it. Someone like him. He took the notebook from me with care, eyes widening as he scanned the symbols. This shouldn't even exist yet, he said, almost breathless. It resolves tension in ways that are impossible without years of practice. I know, I whispered, feeling a thrill of adrenaline. But it exists. And I need a partner who values the music, not the spotlight. His gaze lingered on me, assessing, measuring. There was no mockery, no ambition to co-opt. Just focus. Just integrity. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but from relief. I had found someone who could understand me in a way Zane never could. Over the following weeks, we met in quiet rehearsal spaces and abandoned classrooms. I taught him the subtle rhythms of my progression, guiding his fingers over the strings. Every time his hand brushed mine, I felt a current of something I couldn't name. But it wasn't fear. It was trust. It was anticipation. It was the first real connection I'd had in years. He responded with intuitive brilliance, shaping my chaotic vision into something coherent, alive. Our sessions became a sanctuary. I could speak freely about the melodies I dreamed of, the harmonies no one else would dare attempt, and he would play them with devotion. Each note became a conversation, each rhythm a confession. And all the while, I kept my mind on Zane. I saw the pattern of his future schemes in sharp, unrelenting detail. He would try to control, manipulate, and exploit. But I had Kai. Together, we could shield the music and ourselves from his poison. One evening, after a long session where we layered a complex, emotional composition over a minimalist bass line, we sat in silence, leaning against the edge of the stage. The faint hum of the amplifier filled the room. I felt the weight of everything I had survived, everything I had lost, and the incredible fortune of being here with him. He looked at me, eyes soft and searching. "You carry a lot," he said, his voice quiet, almost intimate. "You don't have to do it alone." I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. "I've never trusted anyone like this," I admitted. "But I think I could trust you." He smiled, a tentative curve of lips that held both caution and hope. "Then we'll do it together." In that smoky, imperfect bar, surrounded by the ghosts of unfinished songs and unseen audiences, a new harmony was born, not just in music, but in life. Kai and I would play this song together, and nothing, not Zane, not greed, not betrayal, would break it. And for the first time since the final note of my death, I felt a glimmer of hope, a pulse of true rhythm in my chest. The rehearsal room smelled of old wood, varnish, and the faint tang of fretboard polish. I was already soaked in sweat from hours of running through the progression, yet I felt more alive than I ever had with Zane. There was no pretense here, no competition for the spotlight, just music, raw and honest. Kai moved with a natural fluidity, fingers dancing across the bass, as if he had always been waiting for this exact progression. I watched him, noting every small adjustment, every subtle shift in rhythm, knowing that together we could make something no one else could touch. There was a logic to him, a consistency, an integrity in how he handled the music. It reminded me of everything Zane had never respected. I ran my hands along the keys of my keyboard, hitting the notes that intertwined with his bass. The sound was fragile yet sturdy, a delicate equilibrium. I could feel the architecture of the composition forming, every measure a testament to our combined precision. I started to understand that music wasn't just a performance, it was a living blueprint, and if executed correctly, it could expose everything Zane thought he could hide. I kept the details of Zane's contracts and future manipulations in mind as I worked. Every note we layered, every harmony we refined, was also a small safeguard. If we could perfect this piece, it would stand as undeniable proof of my authorship, leaving no room for him to claim or control it. Kai didn't need to know all the strategic reasoning behind each rhythm. He simply played, trusting my direction. And I trusted his talent implicitly. Our days blurred together in a focus loop, composing, testing arrangements, analyzing chord structures, and refining transitions. We frequented abandoned rehearsal spaces, empty auditoriums, and even small college bars after hours, wherever the sound could resonate without interruption. The world outside existed only as a distant hum. I could feel the tension of past betrayal slipping away, replaced by a quiet determination. At one point, I caught a glimpse of Zane in the audience at a local open mic, leaning casually against the wall, smirking as if he knew the future was still his. But he couldn't see the work being built in secret. He couldn't hear the intricate counter-melody weaving through the bass line, or the subtle shifts in tempo that made the piece entirely mine. This knowledge alone was a victory. Kai adjusted a tricky measure, hesitated, then looked at me with a question in his eyes. "Do we resolve it here, or do we carry the tension through?" he asked, genuinely seeking guidance. I smiled, a small, sharp smile. "We carry it. Let it simmer." Then the resolution hits harder. Undeniably ours. Hours passed. Sweat beaded on our foreheads, hands cramped, voices hoarse. But the piece evolved in ways I had never dared imagine. Each layer was an assertion, a proof that I controlled the melody, that Zane's dominance was irrelevant when confronted with precision, foresight, and commitment to truth. By the time we finally paused, night had fallen, and the empty bar echoed with the faint remnants of the last chord. I leaned back against the wall, breathing hard, and watched Kai pack up his bass. He didn't need to say anything. The music spoke volumes. We were synchronized, prepared, and unstoppable. I knew then that our alliance was more than a temporary collaboration. It was a shared rhythm of strategy and talent, a way to protect the music and, by extension, myself. Zane's attempts to manipulate, coerce, and dominate would not succeed, not while we had each other's trust, our meticulous notes, and the foresight to predict his every move. As we left the rehearsal space, carrying our instruments through quiet city streets, I felt a rare clarity. The music was alive. And for the first time since Zane's betrayal, I felt like I had a partner capable of standing against him, someone who could match my foresight with skill, precision, and dedication. I wasn't ready to forgive the past, but I was ready to compose a future where the truth of my work would be undeniable. And Kai, without realizing it, was essential to that future. Together, we were no longer just musicians. We were architects of justice and sound, a quiet force shaping what Zane could never claim. The morning light seeped through the cracked blinds of the small studio we had claimed as our headquarters. It smelled faintly of cigarette smoke from the previous night's long session and the lingering tang of old wood from the instrument cases. I sat cross-legged on the floor, sheet music spread around me like scattered leaves, while Kai meticulously tuned his bass, every vibration and pitch exacting and deliberate. We had decided on a new approach to confront Zane, not with confrontation, but with exposure. Every note, every harmonic shift, every clever counterpoint in our compositions would serve as evidence of authorship. Zane had always relied on charm and intimidation to claim ownership of ideas that were never truly his, but we had foresight, and we had precision. "Look at this," I said, pointing at a series of annotated bars. "If we insert this dissonance in the bridge, it will disrupt the expected progression in a way only I would conceive. It's subtle, Zane won't notice, but the record of it will prove the composition's integrity." Kai nodded, his expression unreadable but attentive. "It's risky. He's going to notice the subtle shift eventually. But yes, it's brilliant. It leaves a trail that can't be denied." I watched him as he played through the measure. The sound was raw, almost chaotic, but contained a hidden structure that only we understood. The music wasn't just music anymore. It was a statement, a carefully constructed proof that our work was ours alone. Each note became a defensive wall, each chord a barricade against manipulation. Our days were filled with this meticulous layering. We experimented in empty auditoriums, abandoned practice rooms, and even borrowed spaces in college music halls after hours. Every location became a proving ground for precision. Kai was patient, methodical, and tireless. He questioned, suggested, and adjusted, but always within the boundaries of integrity. His dedication matched my own, and I began to see that our partnership wasn't merely tactical, it was a rare alignment of minds and intentions. Zane had started to catch wind of our work. I heard whispers from mutual acquaintances, how he mocked Kai quietly, calling him too cautious and overly sentimental. But Zane underestimated the quiet diligence of someone who never sought the spotlight. Kai, unlike him, didn't need recognition. He sought only truth and accuracy. One afternoon, we tested a particularly risky sequence, a series of harmonies designed to mimic a chord progression Zane had claimed in the past as his own. We needed absolute accuracy. I held my breath as Kai played, every note a test of memory, instinct, and skill. As the last note faded into the room, I exhaled slowly, realizing it had worked. The sequence was flawless, and the evidence of authorship was undeniable. I paused, watching him carefully adjust his instrument. "You know," I said lightly, "if Zane ever figures out what we've done here, he's going to be furious." Kai didn't look up. "Good. Let him be furious. He needs to know that the work isn't his to claim." There was an unspoken rhythm to our collaboration. We didn't speak of feelings or intimacy, or the past betrayals that had brought us here. Our connection existed entirely in the language of music, the subtle glances over a score, the silent approval of a resolved dissonance, the shared satisfaction in a flawlessly executed passage. It was disciplined, deliberate, and unwavering. As night fell and we packed up our instruments, I felt the weight of the coming confrontation with Zane. But I also felt grounded. For the first time, I had a partner who matched my foresight, my dedication, and my insistence on honesty.
Kai didn't just support me, he amplified me.
Together, we were more than a band. We were a fortress. I allowed myself a brief smile as we walked through the dimly lit streets, our instruments slung over our shoulders. The city was quiet, but our music had already begun to speak. Each note we had played, each measure we had perfected, was a quiet rebellion against Zane's manipulations. And yet, despite our focus, I sensed the first flickers of something unspoken in the silence between us. Small, fleeting moments when our hands brushed over a score, when our eyes met over a complicated measure. I didn't acknowledge them. I couldn't yet. Romance would have to wait. The music and the truth came first. Tonight, we had fortified our position. Tomorrow, we would continue building one note at a time until Zane could no longer claim what was never his. The counterpoint was ours, and every harmonic choice was a victory in the war we were waging. In the quiet aftermath of rehearsal, I realized that for the first time, I was not alone. I had a partner in music, in strategy, in integrity. And though the emotional bond remained untested, the foundation was strong. The studio smelled of polished wood and lingering cigarette smoke, the late afternoon sunlight slicing across the floorboards. I was tired, every muscle aching from hours of rehearsal, but I couldn't stop. Our counterpoint sequences against Zane's false claims had become more elaborate, more daring. And Kai had become indispensable, not just for his precision, but for his insight, the way he could hear things I hadn't even composed yet. We were testing a new section of our latest track, one that contained a hidden harmonic motif meant to expose Zane's plagiarism from years past. I watched as Kai's fingers danced over the strings, each pluck a proof of authenticity. There was an ease to his movements, a rhythm that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than the music. I caught myself staring a moment too long. "You're staring," he said quietly, not looking at me, just adjusting the tuning peg on his bass. "I'm just observing," I replied, heat creeping up my neck. My words sounded thin, almost ridiculous. I reminded myself that focus was everything, intimacy came later. "This part, it's tricky. Are you comfortable with the transition?" Kai paused, finally looking at me, his gaze sharp but calm. "I'm comfortable if you are." But you're tense, Lira. I can hear it in your phrasing. I swallowed, realizing he was right. My hands had been gripping the edges of my keyboard so tightly that the knuckles were white.
I
want this to work. For us, for the music. And for Zane. My voice softened at the end, betraying more than I intended. He moved closer, just slightly, to inspect the notes. The proximity was unsettling in a way that had nothing to do with music. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, the way his warmth contrasted with the cool air of the studio. And when his elbow brushed mine, I felt it, a spark that had been there before, subtle, now undeniable. Lira, he said gently, we're in sync. You trust me, right? I nodded, though the word felt heavier than usual.
Trust.
It was a word I had used freely in music, in collaboration, but in life. I was cautious. I had been betrayed once, and the memory of Zane's duplicity was still sharp. And yet, with Kai, there was a steadiness I hadn't expected. We resumed playing, but something had shifted. Our music became a conversation that went beyond notes and timing. Every glance, every pause, every subtle shift in tempo carried weight. I realized I was listening to him in a new way, noticing the small inflections, the quiet confidence, the patience that mirrored my own. After a particularly complex run-through, we stopped, breathless and sweaty. I was leaning against the piano, trying to steady myself, when Kai reached out to adjust a stray sheet of music. Our fingers brushed. Just a touch, but enough to send a current of awareness through me. I looked up, and for a long moment, we held each other's gaze. It's more than just the music now, isn't it? He said softly. Not a question, but a statement, like he already knew the answer. I didn't respond immediately. I was aware of my own pulse, the warmth creeping up my chest. It's complicated, I murmured, looking back at the keyboard. But I didn't move away. The words felt like a concession, a bridge between caution and acknowledgement. He stepped slightly closer, his presence grounding me. Lira, we're building something real here. Not just the tracks, not just the sequences against Zane. Something real between us. I feel it. I felt it too. The pull, the gravity of a connection that had been simmering beneath the surface for weeks, now impossible to ignore. Yet there was still music, still strategy, still Zane's looming threat. Romance would have to wait, but the tension, electric and undeniable, was no longer something we could hide behind rehearsals and harmonics. Then we focus, I said finally, forcing my voice calm. Music first. Everything else, we let it build. Carefully. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that sent warmth straight to my chest. Carefully, he echoed, his voice low. I can do careful. We returned to the music, each note now tinged with awareness, every chord carrying an unspoken conversation between us. And in that studio, in that moment, I realized that we weren't just partners against Zane anymore. We were partners in something that could be extraordinary, if we survived the crescendo of our own emotions and the storm we were about to unleash on him. By the time we packed up for the night, the sun had dipped below the city skyline. Our fingers lingered on the instruments a moment longer than necessary, hands brushing as we exchanged sheets. I felt it then, a quiet acknowledgement that the partnership we had built was now inseparable from something deeper, something I couldn't name aloud yet. And in the stillness, I allowed myself a tiny, dangerous thought. Maybe this time, I wouldn't be betrayed. The night air was sharp as we exited the studio, the city lights painting long shadows along the pavement. I was still buzzing from our rehearsal, the music and the unspoken weight of our connection intertwining in my chest. Every glance at Kai felt like a pulse in the rhythm we shared, each step syncing with a melody no one else could hear. We had work to do. Zane's new contract negotiation was under scrutiny, and our intel revealed yet another shady clause designed to siphon royalties. But even as I pulled the papers from my bag, I found myself hesitating, watching him more than the documents. His hands moved with quiet precision, adjusting the corner of a music sheet, the same meticulous attention he gave to his bass. I couldn't stop noticing how the city's glow caught in his hair, how his brow furrowed in concentration, and how familiar and safe he felt despite the chaos surrounding us. "You're quiet," he said suddenly, looking up, catching my lingering stare. His tone wasn't teasing. There was curiosity, something warmer, like concern. "I'm thinking," I said, trying to hide the heat creeping at my neck. "About the harmonics. About Zane. About—" I stopped, embarrassed at how close to the truth I'd come. He tilted his head, waiting. I could feel his patience as a tangible force between us. "About us," he finished gently, a quiet statement that made my heart stumble. I looked away, focusing on the papers, trying to ground myself. "About making sure Zane doesn't get away with this. The music, the rights, it all has to be perfect." He stepped closer, his presence grounding, his shoulder brushing mine. "I know," he said softly. "I'm with you. We've got this. But—" "Lira," he hesitated, just a fraction, before letting his words fall. "We can't ignore the rest either. The rest of what's happening between us." My stomach twisted in a delicious, terrifying way. I wanted to look at him, wanted to reach for him, but I was still wary. The betrayal of the past lingered like a shadow over every emotion I felt. And yet, the warmth in his eyes, the steady calm of him, it was nothing I'd ever known from Zane. I took a shaky breath. "We can't," I whispered, voice barely audible over the distant hum of traffic.
Not yet.
"The focus has to stay on Zane. Everything else has to wait." Kai nodded, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "I can wait," he said, and I saw the truth in his eyes. Not impatience, not frustration, just him. Steady, reliable, unwavering. We walked in silence for a moment, the unspoken tension between us thickening with every step. And yet, in that silence, there was understanding, a resonance that matched our music, a rhythm that pulsed just beneath the surface. When we reached my apartment, he paused at the door, his hand lingering on the handle. "Lira, you know, if I could, I'd hold you right now," he said, voice low and intimate. "But I'll wait for you to let me." I swallowed hard, aware of how close he was, how easy it would be to let the floodgate open. But I nodded, a silent acknowledgement that I wanted him more than I had allowed myself to admit. "Someday," I murmured. "When this is over, someday." His lips curved into the faintest smile, eyes softening in a way that made my chest ache. "Someday," he echoed. Inside, the apartment felt cold compared to the warmth lingering from him, but I could still feel the memory of his presence. I sat at my keyboard, fingers trembling as I began to play a sequence we had improvised together, a mixture of triumph and tension. Every note carried the weight of our shared mission, every chord mirrored the push and pull between us. And as the music filled the room, I realized something essential. Our connection wasn't just romance. It was a partnership forged in fire, trust, and mutual respect. The intensity of it didn't diminish the danger of Zane, it amplified it. And yet, even in that intensity, there was a promise that when the storm ended, when Zane finally faced the truth, we would be free to explore what had been quietly growing between us. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself a thought that had been forbidden. That this partnership, this tension, this unspoken pull might survive. That the music, our shared fight, and the connection between us might carry us through, stronger than any betrayal we'd faced. And as I played, the notes rising and falling like our hearts in sync, I felt it. The crescendo was coming not just in the music, but in us. And when it arrived, I knew nothing would be the same again. The rehearsal hall smelled of sweat, leather, and faintly of spilled beer. Kai's favorite cafe had nothing on the scent. The band was warming up, each instrument a tension of nerves and adrenaline. Zane's presence backstage loomed like a shadow I couldn't shake, his eyes flicking between Kai and me, calculating. He thought he could intimidate me, but he didn't understand that I had lived this once. I knew his patterns, his arrogance, the way he tried to dominate not just the stage, but the people around him. And I wasn't alone. Kai's presence steadied me, like a silent promise that I didn't have to face this alone. Zane approached, guitar slung low, a smirk curling his lips. "I see you've moved on," he said, venom in his tone. "But don't think you can hide behind the little bassist." I squared my shoulders. "Kai isn't hiding. He's holding the line where you never could." Kai's hand brushed mine under the table as he tuned his bass, a small, grounding gesture, but one that sent a thrill straight through me. His gaze met mine, steady and unwavering, and suddenly I didn't feel like the scared, powerless girl he once knew. I felt like a force. Together, we were a force. The first note rang out, and the band followed. The music was tight, sharp, alive. Our shared rhythm speaking louder than words. Zane tried to push us off beat, forcing the tension, testing control, but Kai responded instinctively, countering his manipulations. Each time Zane's gaze flicked to me, I met it without flinching. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had someone beside me who could hold that fear, carry it with me, and turn it into strength. During a quiet bridge, I felt his presence near me, leaning in close under the pretense of adjusting a mic. I could smell the faint leather of his jacket, feel the warmth of his shoulder brushing mine. My heart raced, not from fear, but from anticipation, from the undeniable pull that had been simmering for weeks. As the final chord rang out, the tension didn't vanish. Instead, it lingered, thick and palpable between us, unspoken yet undeniable. Zane stormed out, frustrated, defeated, but the music, the fight, and the electricity between Kai and me remained. And in that charged silence, I realized I couldn't deny it any longer. I wanted him, not just as an ally, not just as a partner in music, but as something more. Something dangerous. Something I couldn't let go of. The stage lights blazed like a spotlight on destiny itself. Every chord, every drumbeat, every note carried the weight of everything Zane had tried to steal from me. My music, my voice, my life. And now, tonight, it would all belong to us. Kai and I exchanged a glance before stepping into the spotlight, the energy between us electric, unspoken, and undeniable. Zane was backstage, pacing like a caged animal. He still thought he could control the narrative, the music, even me. But he had underestimated the bond we'd built, the trust, the synchrony, the raw understanding that had grown between Kai and me. Tonight wasn't just a performance. It was a reckoning. As the opening riff began, I felt Kai's hand brush mine. Just a touch, brief, almost accidental, but my pulse leapt. His eyes met mine, and I saw it there. The same longing, the same hunger, the same acknowledgement that neither of us could deny any longer. The music carried us, and with every beat, the world outside faded. Midway through our set, the bass line dipped low, and I stepped closer to Kai, letting the lyrics flow through us both. He leaned into me, his shoulder brushing mine, his hand finding mine again. This time, I didn't pull away. Instead, I let the music guide us, our hearts syncing with the rhythm, our fingers entwining naturally as if they had always belonged together. After the last verse, during a brief instrumental break, I felt the warmth of his body against mine. He turned me toward him, his gaze intense, and whispered, "We've survived him, Lira. We've survived everything." I didn't need to say anything. My lips met his, soft at first, tasting of adrenaline and shared victory. The kiss deepened, urgent and electric, a release of weeks of tension and unspoken feelings. I pressed closer, feeling the steady strength of him grounding me, matching the rhythm of my racing heart. The audience didn't matter, the stage didn't matter, the past didn't matter. Only this, only him. His hands framed my face, his thumbs brushing my cheekbones, and I tilted my head into him, letting the kiss linger, letting it speak the words we hadn't dared say. When we finally broke apart, our foreheads resting together, I whispered, "I've never trusted anyone like this before." He smiled, soft but fierce. "Then don't. Just trust us." The final chords rang out, loud, triumphant, and true. Zane's influence had ended with the last note he tried to control. I had my music, my freedom, And finally, my heart fully aligned with someone who respected, honored, and loved me, not as a possession, but as a partner. Later, backstage, Kai pulled me into another kiss, slower this time, tender and deliberate. I wrapped my arms around his neck, feeling the solid, unwavering promise in his embrace. "This is ours," he murmured against my lips. "All of it." And in that moment, I knew it was true. The music, the fight, and the love we had found were ours, and ours alone.